It should just pretty much, you can admit them all, you know, every single time somebody comes in. So 39 in the lobby, so admit them when it comes in. Yeah, it's growing. I don't know where those extra 10 came from. I didn't see them pop in at any time.
I imagine the next 15 minutes or so as well, like when school finishes, you finally actually get to sit down.
Yeah, and some people are just finishing now, aren't they? So
yeah,
no
no worries.
I'll let everybody in. See you on the other side, Lee.
Yep.
So a good evening to you all. Firstly, thank you for joining us. I'm Katie O'Brien and I'm from Bounce Together. I'm here today with Lee Haywood from Online Safety UK for our webinar, Navigating the Digital World, a bit of an exploration into online safety for today's schools. So unfortunately, at the start of the webinar, you get me to do the boring bit and the housekeeping. So if everyone could just make sure that their mics are off throughout, it makes it a lot easier for people to follow the information, and it makes it a little easier for Lee to present as well. Firstly, another thing from me is we will be recording this webinar, so we absolutely love to see your faces on camera. It makes it a little bit more interactive, and that's what we really want this broadcast to be. But we do understand from recording, and we are streaming it as well, point of view, if you want to turn your cameras off, that is absolutely fine. That's no problem at all. So we'll leave that one with you. So how today will go is I'll hand over to Lee shortly, and Lee is going to talk to you a little bit about what they do at Online Safety UK, what the current situation is in school, why it's such an important issue, and explain to you how you can get involved in a really kind of exciting free research project that we are running in partnership with Lee Haywood and the guys at Online Safety UK. So hopefully that's something really valuable that you can take away, along with a lot of other resources and bits of information. We will be taking a Q&A session, but I'm going to leave that towards the end just so we can kind of run through the topic and then leave all questions at the end. So if you do have anything you want to ask going forward, just pop it in the group chat and we will try and get through as many of those questions as we can do at the end. So tomorrow morning I'll send you the recording, a CPD certificate and any resources as well, so don't worry about kind of remembering absolutely everything. I'll make sure that's all in a neat nice email for you to take away, as well as how you can get involved with the project as well. So I guess that's it from me. I'll hand over to Lee to talk through the exciting bits. So hello, Lee.
Hello, Katie. Yes, my name is Lee and I'm the founder of Online Safety UK. The reason why we're teaming up together is to make sure that we can bring something to schools where they can have a good baseline of information so they can make decisions around online safety going forward. But there's a big reason as to why I personally found coming away from the work that I was doing before. So I was a police officer before for 10 years. I came away from that to come into the online safety arena within education because there was a huge gap of understanding, a huge gap around the education of it, and there was a lot of vulnerability there. So online safety as a whole can sometimes be referred to as internet safety. It can be referred to quite often as e-safety. The reality is it's just a very, very broad term. What we really mean by online safety is something that you could specialize in a number of different roles within online safety, but we like to specialize within all of these roles as best that we can. For example, you can specialize just in the digital well-being, the emotional well-being of the users of the internet. It is one massive project in itself, understanding the effects of how our devices grab our attention, how they affect our emotions, how they dramatically affect our sleep, which in turn affects our development and our relationships. It's a huge thing, that one topic on its own. The other side that I like to look at as well is the understanding and the critical thinking side within everybody, not just the kids, but also the adults too. The critical thinking side in the online realm, whether that is when you're playing a game and you're speaking to people, whether it is you're chatting on social media, whether that is Facebook for us older generation, whether it is Instagram, whether it is TikTok for the newer generation. If you're speaking to people, how can I recognize when something is genuine and when something is off? That is a really important skill to develop with everybody. So what I was finding is it's really good fun to come into schools, which is what we do as a business. We can come into schools and we can educate. It's always interactive for us. We make sure the kids are fully involved. We have games that they can play. It can be from year R all the way to year 11. It needs to be in every age group. But what I was finding was we didn't really have any up-to-date, real information from the people using the internet. So the people that we're teaching were using information that was from 5 or 6 years ago, which we all know in the digital world is out of date, and it's going to be quite significantly out of date. So what I wanted to produce was something where we could create a baseline, but do this every single year, so that we actually understand what it's like to be a kid and teenager in the online world, what it's like to be a parent in the online world and a carer, and actually what is it like to be a teacher, trying to teach it, trying to speak about it, trying to hold conversations about it, and deal with all the safeguarding issues that come your way as well. So we wanted to get a better understanding of it, which came about in the form of a new report. So what I'm going to be asking you as schools to get involved with, which is completely free for everyone to get involved in, is a survey for children. And then there will be, up and coming very soon, a survey for their parents and for you as staff as well. So there will be 3 types of surveys. They will all be online safety based, but they will be focused around the usage. So what do you use? How often do you use it? It will be based around how do you feel when you are doing things? Have you had experiences that maybe didn't make you feel safe? Have you had experiences that make you think you've watched content that is illegal? Some quite serious questions. So we're going to go through that so we have an understanding of, okay, where does every single school, where do they sit right now? What level of knowledge do we have? What level of experience and maturity do we have? And where are your gaps going forward that you can build into? So this survey, we've already run once before. We ran it in the spring of 2022. We had 16,000 children get involved in it at the time. It was a huge survey that helped us publish a report called If Not Now, When? And I'm going to show you that report in a second to give you an idea of, if you get involved in this survey, this is the kind of information that you're going to get out of it. What is important to understand is I'm going to show you a report that is of all the schools combined information, but you're going to have the option to get a report just for your school through Bounce. So you're going to be able to have all the data just from your children, so you know where your school sits, and we will also give you and share out publicly the information for all schools combined data, obviously without sharing any personal information. So it'll be very helpful for you as a school to understand where you sit, and it'll be very, very helpful on a national level to understand where is society moving, where is it changing within the age groups. So I will share my screen, and I'm going to run through the report in a brief way, just to allow you to understand the types of questions that we ask and the type of information that we're gaining, which will just emphasize the reasons why we really need to do this now. And it isn't something that can wait. It is something that is very pressing in what we're finding from about a year 2, so 5 or 6 year olds, all the way up until further education. We're finding that since COVID, their experiences have got more negative. Their exposure to content has become more negative, and they are saturated effectively by the amount of screen time that they have and finding it hard to come away. But when you ask them what they would like to do, there's a good percentage of them that would say they don't want to spend that much time on the screen, but they don't know what else to do anymore. So it helps us build new thinking patterns when we build this into all of our work that we do for the children, so they can understand what else can they do, how can they be creative again that doesn't have to be a screen. So I will share my screen in a second. There we go. So this is the If Not Now When report. Hopefully everybody can see it. The very important point that I'm going to make at the very start, so we have our If Not Now When report heading. We had 326 safeguarding concerns that we identified and had to action with the school as part of the survey. When we did the survey, we had to do a lot of work because the questions we were asking were difficult questions for children. We had to do a lot of work of understanding what can we do to protect these children when they have to answer these questions, and how can we promote honesty when we get these questions answered. So we had to give a run through with teachers about understanding a good environment to give a child to allow them to answer the questions in their own way, but also identifying that sometimes when they answer certain questions, that means they need some immediate safeguarding interventions, and that was all built within the survey. But what it did produce was 326 safeguarding concerns. This is where we as a company come in a little bit different to any other company that does online safety, is we really care about the safeguarding of the children ourselves. We don't just push the responsibility back onto the school and go, that's your problem. Actually, we have the skills, the knowledge and the advice to help you make decisions on how to protect those children going forward. Which you may not currently have. You might not have heard of the apps, or you might not recognize the behaviors, or for whatever reason might not understand that it could be a safeguarding concern. And that's where we come in and say, because of X, Y, and Z, this could be a risk factor for this child, and it's something you need to record. On some occasions, it needs to go to social services, need to go to children's services. This is the kind of stuff we were helping schools go through this pattern. So it was a much bigger number than we were expecting. We were expecting 5 to 10. We ended up with 326. And we went through a pattern of asking questions to children in a carefully considered way, so that we weren't going to overly traumatize them, and we weren't going to target certain apps. So we didn't try and create a bias within our questions. And one of the big things that came out within all of this was, first and foremost, there's a lot more young children, years 3s and 4s, that have access to their own mobile phone than most schools had anticipated. They knew some kids did, but didn't realize the extent. In a lot of schools, we found it was more than 50% of year 3s had their own mobile phone. And we had to be very clear about what we meant by their own mobile phone. But what this brings rise to is just access to apps that probably isn't right for their age. One of the big ones for us was TikTok leading children to really dangerous apps. Things like Omegle, which for me personally is something that probably shouldn't, well, it should not exist, but it does. And it is probably going to be a safeguarding concern every single time a child says they've been on there, because it's very unlikely they've not had a negative experience by being on it. But when we actually looked at the percentages of like how many people are accessing this one site, this one really dangerous video chat site with anybody else in the world, and from the age of 8, 3% of the children said they'd seen it, which scared me a little bit, because I've got a young girl who's 7. And actually, when you start talking to these kids and you work out the ones that have just ticked every box, and we ignore those ones, and we look at how they've tactfully answered the questions, it came to 3%, which was already a concern. But once you get to age 12, it was 8% of 12-year-olds had already been on the site. And this is Omegle, not TikTok. TikTok is probably more in the 70 or 80% for a lot of the kids. So for us, understanding this information changes how we talk about it, changes how we teach it, and changes how we educate staff when we do CPD with staff, in understanding what words you need to listen out for, what behaviors you need to listen out for, and actually we've probably got some really traumatized kids that we don't even recognize are traumatized and might well be coming out on their behaviors. And it helps that understanding of their behaviors might actually point towards something else going on. So that it gave us something that's kind of one of our headlines, gave us something that we really didn't realize was so big an issue until we asked for some honesty around the usage. But as we go through, we asked about games. One of my big things for me is we as a company, we don't go to any school and go, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you cannot do that, because there's age ratings and because you shouldn't be allowed to be on that, or whatever it is. And that's not our stance with it. We definitely don't encourage children to go onto things that is above the age rating that it should be. But if I was to say to them, yeah, you can't play any games that are age 12 plus, it's an unrealistic expectation to think that most kids are going to listen to that. So then I've shut down the conversation and I can't speak to them. And one of the big things for us was actually nearly every child plays games. Nearly every single child. 96% of 9-year-olds were playing games. So then if we shut down that conversation, we can't build any skills and any knowledge. So it was an important way for us to understand our approach to talking about it was the right approach to go about it, to engage in the conversation, but it's just a fine line of making sure we also don't encourage them to go onto things or make it feel like it's okay. This is the kind of information you're going to be able to get by doing this survey. You're also going to be able to understand the usage, so you're going to be able to see how many kids are playing these games, what are they doing. You'll be able to see it throughout your year groups. You'll see the popularity in certain year groups with certain games, which can be really, really helpful. You'll be able to understand about the age ratings, around behaviours around the age ratings as well. You'll be able to understand whether they get what a stranger is online, which we think we teach them really well with it, but our experience is them putting it into practice is really difficult. Even though they know it's wrong, them putting it into practice can be really, really difficult. And this gives some really good information to help you along in making sure you talk about the right subjects to the right group of children. 45% said that they spend too much time on their devices because they are bored. That is across the board. That is every age group. Nearly half of our children said they spend too much time on their devices because they're bored. And then we went to go on and build on that. What we also found was actually a lot of these children do want a way to fix this, but they don't.
Emotions and screen time. 45% said they spend so much time on their device because they're bored.
That is correct.
I mean, I do.
So the emotions and screen time was the next one that we really focused in on as well. So understanding when we come into a class, anytime I go into a class, I will ask them about who games, what do they play, and then I will ask them, how many of you get angry when you play? And a lot of hands will go up and they'll explain of all their silly little stories of I broke a controller or I threw my TV out the window or whatever it is that they come out with. But what we actually are recognizing here is they haven't got any emotional regulation, and the games are really pushing how much they can cope with. And that is a physical bodily reaction that they're getting that they are ignoring and doing nothing about, which needs a lot more work with them. Understandably, when you speak to year 3s, year 4s, year 5s, year 6s, year 7s, and probably year 8s, emotional regulation isn't something that's very natural to a lot of them yet, but it's something we need to help them build earlier, because the anger is really there. And the anger can present in lots of different ways. It doesn't have to just be smashing things up. It can be having a conversation with a friend in a group chat that turns really sour really quickly, and then becomes the parents will contact the school and I expect the school to deal with it. I'm sure a lot of staff recognise and relate to that situation very often. And so rage can come out in lots of different ways, and it was just recognising, okay, how many people are actually feeling it? And as you can see, it spikes in year 7 and year 8. The home life. So what we will be doing is we'll be doing this with the children, but then we're going to be asking those children's parents to come and get involved too. We had about 2,500 parents involved. I think 2,000 parents involved last time. which is really helpful when it's the parents of the children we're asking, because we can compare the data. And it's really interesting sometimes to see that disparity between what the children say and what the parents say. And there's often a very big difference. And again, you'll be able to get this information by doing this survey. This one worried me. This one I didn't like to see, but I understand it. And that 45% of 8 to 11-year-olds say that they'd ask their friends or Google before their parents if they had a problem online. That is definitely a number that I want to get down, and I think comes down to confidence building with parents, rather than telling parents they're doing something wrong, or that it's a really big scary world and they should lock down their child's phones or whatever it is. For me, it's actually confidence building in how do we have a conversation without flipping and without freaking out. How do we get parents to have more constructive conversations with their children around the online world to lower that number, so that children will start to go to their parents again more? As you would expect, when you get teenagers of 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, less of them want to speak to their parents about their online world. We can understand that. In adolescence, you're not always going to want to tell your parents all your private life. But at the same time, when you're talking about only around about 65% of primary age kids want to speak to their parents about the online world, it's not a high enough number. That's not going to protect the children long term. And then we asked a question that produced a lot of those safeguarding concerns that we raised to the schools, where we actually asked the children, okay, just in percentages for this one, children who have seen dangerous or potentially illegal or extreme content. Our question was really long-winded, and we actually had a video explaining what we meant by each of these, because we were asking really young children to identify something that can be really hard to identify. So it was a very long-winded question that we spent a lot of time adding context to help the understanding across the different age ranges. And what we found was actually kids are experiencing potentially illegal or extreme content at a much higher rate than what any of the reports are saying from Ofcom or Internet Matters or anybody else right now, because they asked all these questions pre-COVID. Since COVID, things have got a lot worse. These percentages are a lot higher. And it's something we need to deal with now and need to make sure we educate now, rather than doing that into the future. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just come back to the point here that what you've just seen on that survey, I will make sure comes out to all of you, so you have free access to that. You can share it out to your parents, share it out to other schools. You can do what you like with it. It's completely public report that we shared out back in November for everybody to access. It holds some really useful information there. But when you want information for your school to get a baseline of going, that's great on a national picture that we're like that, but where are we at? We're now providing that through this survey. So we're trying to make sure that you've got the tools available to you to know what you need to focus in on, how often you're going to need to do it, because online safety, definitely on our perspective and what's coming from DfE, what's coming through the Keeping Children Safe in Education very recently with the amendments, is actually it should probably be taught at least half-termly in every single year group, and assembly material just isn't enough. It needs to be classroom based across probably PHSE and computing where possible. It sounds like a lot, but actually we have the resources to give you. We have the survey results to give you. You have lots of resources out there you can use from proper charities, NSPCC, and from CEOP and stuff like that, that are credible resources that you can use to give these children good conversation starters and good topic points. And it's really important that we build on this, talking about online safety, being in control of online safety now, so the damage isn't caused later on down the line. So everybody can sign up to this. It's completely free to sign up. Once it is completed, you will get your own report that you can have a look at yourselves as a school and analyze yourselves as a school. And then that information will also be brought in for a bigger report. So we use it on a national level, so we understand where it goes in the future. What I'm hoping is that it starts building a bit of momentum around online safety. There are lots of schools out there right now that are doing a great job on online safety and probably just need a little bit extra support. And there are a lot of schools out there that just don't know where to start because they're inundated with safeguarding issues. That's kind of where we come in, is to make sure that we give you resources so that you can make sure that you don't have to spend loads of time planning, and that we give you that safeguarding advice. I will go in one-to-one with, say, one family or even one child. I did it 3 times last week, where I'll go into a school one-to-one and we will physically speak around something that's gone wrong online and what behaviours didn't help and how we can learn going forward and things like that. The safeguarding element is crippling a lot of schools and they don't know where to turn. Again, that's where we're supposed to come in, and we're allowed to help you for everything until you get to a safeguarding disclosure. Once you get to a disclosure, it has to be the school, but we will help you identify that disclosure and what to do with that disclosure going forward. So hopefully that gives you a good indication of what you're going to get from us and from Bounce, providing you with a tool that I think is going to be extremely helpful. What I would ask is for everybody that's on here right now is to think about like your clusters of schools or your academy trusts that you might be involved in. Think about your councils that you're involved in, and spreading this word out that more people can come in and get involved in this. Because what we're aiming for is to get a much higher amount of children involved across a nice big age range again, so that we can have a really good data set, so that we can improve how online safety is taught going forward. I think that is about it, Katie.
No, that is fantastic. Thank you, Lee. And I think one thing for me is every time I see that report, I see some other shocking statistic and realise kind of how out of date with the online safety world even I am. And I like to think I am rather up to date with it. But I think I remember in our first call, I think I was even using the term e-safety still. And even that's out of date with where it should be. So I think it just highlights the importance of the continued work and research that you guys are doing just to make sure that we are all completely up to date with this hugely important topic. So probably one thing to mention from me before we move into any questions from anybody is what we will do with this is, so I'm from Bounce Together. And for those of you that don't know us, I know obviously we've got a lot of customers on here as well. We're a children's wellbeing and mental health measurement platform for schools. So we have a large repository of research-based surveys that cover a variety of different categories, from online safety to eating habits to general wellbeing and you name it, for parents, pupils and staff. And we find a huge amount of our customers are really wanting to gain some visibility and information and understanding really on this such an important topic. So hopefully for us working with you guys, it's giving people the right questions to ask in the right way. And that in itself is such a complex topic. You know, using your survey as opposed to going creating your own for a school is saving such a huge amount of time and effort in making sure that those are the right things to ask children and using the right terminology. So hopefully by opening this up to everybody as well as a free kind of resource, it gives everybody the opportunity to get back into and get involved in something that is really, really important. So yeah, we're really looking forward to working with you and seeing the results of this. And what we will do is hopefully this webinar acts as a bit of like an information about the project, general kind of online safety world and the work that Online Safety UK are doing. But what we will do after we have run the survey and got the results back is we'll run kind of a follow-up webinar. So rather than you seeing some of the insights that are found from the last survey and some of the information from those results, is we'll do another webinar that presents the actual findings, kind of where we are now, how things have changed, and really looks at that overall kind of holistic picture and what we can do with that information. So hopefully those of you that joined us today, those that want to get involved in it, we'll send you the link to do so. I'll share that in the chat as well. You can contact us, you've got our details, we'll make sure you've got those. And if you do get involved, the next webinar will probably be a fantastic resource for you to get on board with as well, and really kind of find out what we can do and what is the new information and new findings we've had. So I'll leave it to you now, Lee. I have had a couple of questions in because we are streaming this on a couple of our social medias as well. So we've had a couple of questions in off Facebook, but in the meantime, hopefully it'll give anybody on the live webinar a chance to ask any questions. So we've had one, Lee, that is pretty much, where could people go for additional support around this topic? Where would you recommend that people go?
Yeah, so we have a website, onlinesafetyuk.com, which has a parent side to it. So it has lots of information for parents to take in. So it's produced by myself and several other people that have a really good understanding about the apps, a really good understanding about the games, how they work mechanically and things like that, and so that things can get set up correctly. You don't get hidden dangers and hidden worries and things like that. We have that parental resource, but we also have a lot of resource around on our webpage. It will tell you this is actually what's expected of you. Nice and simple, nice and plainly put, rather than reading the hundreds of pages of Kixie and understanding all the changes that DFE keeps setting. We put it really plain and simple. This is your criteria that you should be meeting to meet the online safety part. And then we just give a very simple spin on, and you can do it by doing these relatively simple things. They're always going to be time consuming, unfortunately, within any sphere of adding anything into your curriculum right now, which is jam packed. Adding anything in is going to be difficult, but we try to make it as easy and as simple as possible in sometimes short chunks and sometimes bigger chunks. The other part that I would say with learning about online safety, obviously not just trying to like plug our website, when you actually look around at the websites, I would say Think You Know is a very important website created by CEOP. It has good up-to-date resources you can use and videos you can use on there. You're going to need to spend quite a bit of time planning it. If you can find the time to plan it, the resources there are really good and they're changing all the time. I would just add one caveat to that of anyone that's still using the Lee and Kim video from CEOP. That is 13 years old and very, very out of date. And CEOP have now said that cannot be used, but I know a lot of schools like to still use it. And then looking at Project Evolve as well. Again, Project Evolve has lots of resources out there that are built for schools, but it's going to take a lot of planning in, and it doesn't always fit your schools. Whereas we as a service, the things that we provide will become more bespoke, and we will plan that in for you. You have your lessons planned, prepared. They have other websites out there that will tell you, okay, this is what you need to do, and these are the resources you can use for this age range, for example. So there are things out there for you to use. I would say, first and foremost, if you haven't done anything on Keeping Children Safe 22 with the changes, you need to do some training with all staff of the whole school, which is the requirement set, just to understand what do we need to learn and understand around online safety. That you need to just implement some training, whether that's from the council, whether you get it online. We have a few courses that are out there, or you've got someone that's really good within the school, member of staff that's really good within the school that can run that training for you. Getting some training for all staff, not just your DSLs, would be a really good starting point.
Yes, that's really important, isn't it? Because I think with such a topic that is kind of constantly evolving and changing, it can probably feel like you're often reinventing the wheel in terms of resources, support, things that we're showing children. And hopefully by leaning on some of those fantastic sites that you mentioned, Lee, and some of the resources there, it prevents you reinventing the wheel, or supports you a little bit more in reusing up-to-date stuff that's already out there. Next question would be off our Twitter is the survey suitable for all age ranges and all kind of groups of children, including children with SEN challenges?
Yeah, so the survey is suitable for all age ranges from Key Stage 1, not early years, Key Stage 1, all the way up till Key Stage 4, to, well, further education as well can do it as well. So your 5-year-olds to your 18-year-olds, anybody can get involved in doing that. The SEND side will depend on the needs of the child. It might mean that they need some one-to-one support to be able to answer some of the questions. And in some of the questions, they just won't be relevant for them because of their specific needs. So it does depend on their needs. But that said, if when you have a look at the survey, for example, there's a text-to-speech button, so it will talk the question out to whoever's filling it out, and that can be really helpful. The the big thing for me that I would ask any school that is going to sign up and do this survey, as best as you can, please set up an environment. We will try and send this information out anyway, but please set up an environment where they can answer the questions on their own without people over people's shoulders, and they've got a bit more freedom to answer it. I know you can't do that in Key Stage 1. I have a son that's in Key Stage 1. I would never expect him to ever be able to do it. But for the children that can, giving them some freedom to answer it privately and honestly, and will really help these results. So it's something that I really ask teachers to try and provide. It's a tough ask. It's not an easy ask in a school environment, but it can be so beneficial for the long term.
And maybe one thing to add in from me there, and maybe one of the reasons that we're working with you guys at Online Safety UK, Lee, in this is, as well as potentially saving you guys a lot of time in terms of doing the analysis at Bounce Together using our software, the actual way that children will answer the questions, every question can be translated into 65 different languages using our software. Children have kind of a picture dictionary function to support them with understanding certain words they might be struggling with. And, you know, it's not only extremely valuable for our children, but also a lot of our parents, because it makes sure that everybody understands what's being asked and the data is more comparable and more reliable as well. So hopefully that's one thing that we'll get by working with us on this as well. Next question, which one should I choose, is, this is a good one actually, is can we share this webinar and the links to get involved in the survey?
Yes, I encourage everybody to share this out. It's something that we're constantly trying to promote out to schools. We often do it through councils that send it through to schools as well. Share this out far and wide. All I would say is, wherever you share it to, that school needs to sign up for their own link so that they can get their own data. What we don't want happening is that schools share their school link out to other schools, because then your data will be skewed with other schools' data. So share a way that we have it available and where they need to go to sign up. Please do. Don't worry about parents, because we will be accessing the parents through the schools, and we won't be asking parents to do it individually outside of it, because we want the parents of the children that have done the survey to do the responses rather than just any parent. It's quite important to have that, so we can balance up the two answers.
Do you already have a sign up link, Lee? Is there anything we could drop into the chat just to make it easy for people?
I do have a sign up link. I will grab it in a second and I will send it to you in an email. I can't access your chat for some reason.
Perfect. Well, I can pop that in the chat for everybody. And like I said, we'll make sure that everybody gets this recording tomorrow and it's information, the links that Lee has mentioned, etc. But I'll also make sure to include that sign-in link as well. And then anybody that's joining us live across the plethora of social platforms that we are currently streaming on, I'll make sure that that is in the comments of each of the video as well. So anybody that wants to get involved, it just makes it really easy for everybody to do so. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of the questions on here, unless anybody has anything that they'd like to add into the end at all. Feel free to turn your microphones off. We do like to hear your voices as well, if you would like to get involved. But if not, I guess that brings us pretty much the end of the broadcast, a couple of minutes early, so you can pop off early as well. Probably one of the last things to touch on, and maybe a question from myself, Lee, is what sort of timescale can people look at? I know we touched on it before, but maybe it's a good idea just to give everybody a bit of an idea of a timescale in terms of the results.
Yeah, so what we're encouraging is this will all be completed by the Easter holidays, whatever your Easter holidays will be, depending on where you are in the country. That is our hope. Once that's completed, and we get to that point, as long as schools have had enough time and they've been able to do it, we'll probably close it then, so we can get the bulk of the data. So we're talking from now, we're talking roughly 8 to 10 weeks to get that data together. That said, once we have closed it for the bulk amount of like for our report, if not now when report, this survey is still going to be available to schools to do ongoing. So if it isn't something that you can't participate in, say this year, you will be able to do it in September, for example. So it's something that will be available for you to do still.
Brilliant. And then actually, I know I said last question, but one has just popped in and I quite like it, so we'll squeeze that one in if we can. Is what do you actually aim to do with the data on a collated perspective, Lee, at Online Safety UK?
It depends on which context that is meant in. So what we plan to do is to collate this data, and then we're going to provide it to Ofcom. So we provided the data to Ofcom last time, and they used the data last time. Ofcom will have a legal requirement to obtain this kind of data going forward. Once the Online Harms Bill comes out, they will have legal rights and legal responsibility over it, and we'll be providing them with this information, asking them to base a lot of the stuff that they're looking to change going forward around some of this information. It will help support some of their changes too, but also this is designed to change the strategies around education for online safety. That's the whole point of it, is to change the strategies around how we're going to keep children safe online, so that they're better protected, so that families are better gelled together in the digital world, so that education is made easier and quicker in the digital world. That is the whole purpose of it, and we'll be working through that. Importantly for everybody to know that the data that we will hold, although initially we will always ask for a child's name, we'll ask for the class that they're in, the school that they're at, that kind of stuff, that is purely for that safeguarding element. So that if we need to contact you and go, we've got a concern, it's this boy or this girl from this year group in this class, we can identify who it is rather than not being able to identify. I know a lot of bounce members will be able to do this a different way, but for the non-bounce members, we'll hold that data until we create the bigger report. Once we have that bigger report with the if not now when report, where we get that data, all the personal data is erased. We don't use personal data anymore. We literally just have what age were they, but we don't have their name, we don't have anything else.
I think we might have lost Lee. I don't know if anybody else can let me know if they hear him.
No, I can't hear him.
No, it says I think we might have lost him. Well, I will just round us off because I think Lee touched on something really important then, is in terms of potentially something for some of our customers on here is obviously with Bounce Together within your surveys, you get that analysis down to the individual child level. So you will have that with this survey. You will have your full report as usual, as standard, that goes right down to that individual level. So you will be able to look at each pupil's answers, the responses by question type, responses, and really see the granularity of that data. It will be something that at some point going down will also form part of the bounce alerts to your safeguarding system as well. So that's a project that we're working on that you'll be aware of, that information will integrate straight away. So hopefully it should make that a really seamless process for you going forward. So that's something really valuable that hopefully you can take away. But like Lee said, there'll be that ability for everybody else through Online Safety UK, and they'll make sure you have access to all that information. So I guess that brings us to the end of the session, and leaves me just to thank everyone for taking the time to join us tonight. We hope you join us for some of our other broadcasts we've got coming up. Now we've got a fantastic School Library Association broadcast lined up for World Book Day, and some themes around kind of stress awareness month as well, and some really important topics coming up. So do join us for further broadcasts. Huge thank you to Lee if you can still hear us. He's probably one of the most insightful speakers I think we have sometimes. I know I learn something every time I speak to him. So huge thank you for him for joining us, and have a great evening, everyone. We hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.